So you don't necessarily have the hardcore, old-fashioned, get the story. I don't care if my hair is a mess. I don't care if I'm dripping wet. There's a few out there still, but for the most part. So that's that. And yes, when this started, I called in every chip I ever had. I called a very good buddy at CNN, who really assigned most of the stories. He was very high, very interested. I sent him your website, a lot of your information. He was high, yay, yay, shut down. And I never did get an explanation. As you well know, I contacted some of our local media people. The main anchor on the local station wanted to do a story, we thought, and we shot a lot of video of the activity. In those days, it was very obvious. Now it's a little harder. You don't have the mornings where you have the deep blue sky, and then the afternoon. You get the pale blue-white sky if you're lucky. And as you well know, that story never aired. Comment. I would consider that a fairly serious, dedicated effort by a media person, and yet we saw nothing come of it. Response. Nothing came of it. Exactly. As you well know, the USA Today, which is an international publication, did a story on it, but it was obviously with an agenda, basically poking fun at those goofy people who saw those things. I believe there was one or two credible people interviewed, but for the most part, the reporter started out with an agenda to sort of mock, make fun of those people who were seeing things in the sky. And if I had a dime for everybody else that they called, wrote, or begged, I could at least buy an ice cream cone. To no avail, just hitting a wall. Comment. And this was with all your connections. Response. This is with years of connections. It's unprecedented in my life. And I cannot name another story. People point to Watergate as this big watershed cover-up. I find that laughable. This, in my opinion, is the biggest story, and I approached many of my colleagues this way. This is the biggest story in recorded human history. You have an entire planet now covered with whatever, by whoever, and nobody's even acknowledging it. What the heck is going on, and how come we don't know? Question. That's the question. What could explain that level of refusal? Response. A few things, okay? A few things, to be fair. Fear. I saw that. Fear. Because the folks that get it know who's doing it, and they're afraid. Okay? They know it's something bigger than them. They know all the possibilities of who is able to put planes in the sky, that many, every day, 24/7. It doesn't take a nuclear physicist to figure out that it's not the guy around the corner. This is big. Comment. So even the journalist has that threshold that they're unwilling to cross. Response. Oh yeah. Afraid. And the few that are left who do catch on to it and say, wow, I want to do this story, like we were just discussing. They hit a wall somewhere, and I'm never told where it is. I don't know if it's the news director. I don't know if it's the station manager. I don't know who. But they hit that brick wall, and it goes away.
Mysteries of the mind. It is the world that has been pulled over our eyes. As you know, I've been a pilot for over 40 years. I've been flying. I stopped counting my hours at 3,500 hours, which is a fair amount. I've owned 7 airplanes in my life. I have ratings all the way up to twin IFR. I am not jet rated, but you know, everything else but. Today, Clifford, when all of a sudden you see these trails in the sky in the morning when you wake up, and by late morning, early afternoon, the sky is totally overcast. It is not natural. The government and other people say, oh, well, that's a contrail, condensation, contrail that all planes do at a certain altitude. And I said, you don't know what you're talking about. Yes, there are contrails. Go back to World War II, we had contrails, but they didn't last. This was, you know, in those days it was condensation of moisture, and then it dissipates after, I don't know, maybe depending on the altitude, maybe a minute, maybe a little over a minute, but around a minute, and it's gone. These things last all day long, unless there's a strong wind and it blows out of the way. Now it's gotten so bad, and I talk to people, as you know, all over the world, and it's happening almost every country that I'm aware of in the world. We have listeners in at least 50 countries that we know of, and people are always reporting back. If we get into a discussion or times that you have been on the show before, people come back and just report incredible experiences. They have a lot of respiratory problems. They never had that before. People are having a lot of sinus problems. They've never had that before. And it's always after they have been inundated with some of these sprays. You also asked about, you know, how do people feel about it? They are extremely concerned because there seems to be something that is happening that is affecting them physically, and in some cases even emotionally and psychologically. So there is a drastic change in what is happening around us in what, 5 years, 5.5 years, and people have never seen this or experienced this before.
Clifford, it's so good to be on tape in person with you on this subject. I know before we couldn't show my face, we couldn't hear my voice because I was under contractual agreement. I'm no longer under that contractual agreement. So I can be here in person, and that feels good. And I thank you so much for translating my prior discussion with you on the media and all of that. But today what I'd really like to talk about is the medicine end, which is my passion, and my whole reason for being involved in this is to try to help people stay as well as they can stay given the givens. I also want to say something that's very important to my heart, is that I am deeply patriotic. That's all I really want to say. Never thought I'd live to be seeing these times. As you know, recently information was brought to us that's critical in terms of health. So I want to deal with that first, and then we can go back and talk about the other contents of this aerosol spray and the impact to the body, and perhaps some mitigating medicines. We have found out through a very credentialed research doctor that perhaps what we're seeing occasionally show up in our air supply is a fungus. The reason this is so critical is apparently this fungus dramatically compromises the immune system by consuming those nutrients the immune system uses to repair and rebuild. And like every system in our body, the immune system has to keep rebuilding itself. It will wear out, it will wear down, and it has to keep regenerating. If it doesn't have those nutritional tools to do that, your immune system becomes dramatically compromised, unable to deal with any kind of invader. That's why I think we're seeing so many more colds and flus than we've seen in the last 5.5, 6 years, than we've seen in a long time. I know in my clients, these things are like epidemic. Sinus infections, colds and flus, that's on the lighter side. On the heavier side, we're seeing a lot more cancers and some very devastating disease, implying an extremely compromised immune system. Part of that has to be this fungal kind of invasion, because, as I said, this fungus eats the nutrients that the immune system uses to rebuild itself. People say, well, what do you do about a fungus? Well, there's some things that we know that are very good natural medicines for fungal invasions like that. Garlic kills fungus pretty much on contact. The Chinese mushrooms, reishi, shiitake, maitake, particularly in extract form, have been very, have a lot of efficacy. Caprylic acid, which you can find in any health food store. There are a number of things, and finally colloidal silver, we know, is a major antifungal. So when people are looking at their bodies and saying, why am I always feeling kind of run down and tired, it may be we're being told now that this person is looking at the blood of many, many people, and almost everyone